Enjoy early access to ad-free episodes each week when you subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium in Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show. Why, hello there and happy Friday. Thank you, as always, for joining me here on the Wedding Planning Podcast for a Friday Q&A bonus show. Today I have a follow-up to the Appetizer Charcuterie episode that ran just 2 days ago on Wednesday. And today's show is going to be a little bit of everything. We're going to do things a little bit differently. I do have a few of your questions. I do have a few of your hindsight 2020 wedding experiences that you shared. Thank you for being in touch with those. And then I also have just kind of like a little editorial background on how this episode came to be and the why behind it, if you will. So like I said, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. We'll start with the background of the episode and then we'll shift from there. So do-it-yourself food at any kind of celebration is a next level of being organized and prepared and doing your research and really being careful about doing your price comparisons, your shopping. And I tackled this topic originally on the podcast because I find a lot of joy in maximizing the quality and the value of pretty much anything that I do. And I have been to numerous wedding celebrations, and I had my own wedding celebration, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But the cocktail hour has been underwhelming, to say the least, at many of the weddings that I've been to. And so I formulated that episode to kind of walk you through a flow chart from start to finish of what it would look like, to set that up on your own, and then really to highlight the cost savings that you could enjoy by doing it yourself, in addition to, again, maximizing the quality of the end product. So anytime we are maximizing the quality of something and also simultaneously minimizing the price tag, my eyes light up and I get really excited. So that's kind of the why behind that episode. Now, as with everything in wedding planning and everything we talk about on this show, there are so many nuances and so many layers of gray that we can kind of delve into, so many little rabbit holes you can go down. And this topic is obviously no exception. So if you're someone who's envisioning platter past hot appetizers during your cocktail hour and you've enlisted a professional caterer to do that for you, then Wednesday's show may not be super applicable to that situation. I won't say never. I don't like to say never, but I probably wouldn't advocate for a couple to go ahead and try to serve hot hand-passed appetizers during their cocktail hour, that they are somehow orchestrating that all behind the scenes to happen themselves using like frozen prepared foods that they had bought at a wholesale warehouse store, for example. I don't think the end result there would turn out well. However, if you are just looking to set up a spread of charcuterie snack type appetizers to tide your guests over between the end of the ceremony and the start of the dinner hour, that's what cocktail hour traditionally is. And if you're looking to do that in a really simple way, again, that show on Wednesday gave you a really easy roadmap to follow. Now, one of the things that I really, really love about that show is that it's not only applicable to your wedding celebration, that formula that we walked through and those tips that I shared, those can be applied to literally any event that you host from now until eternity. So I'm talking bridal showers, wedding showers, bachelorette parties, and then beyond your wedding, baby showers, birthday parties, wine nights with your girlfriends. Like anything you do, that formula of shopping for really high quality ingredients and getting them at a really, really decent price and then setting everything up yourself, it's a win-win all around. And I would really encourage you to keep that in your back pocket for future events that you might be hosting or helping out with. Okay, so with all that background, all of that laid out, I'm going to shift into some of your questions that came in. And the first question has to do with a future mother-in-law. Yay for future mother-in-laws. We love you. And we are all doing our best to blend a family and blend different personalities and come together and love and respect one another. And in this couple's situation, the future mother-in-law, she likes the idea of doing a certain aspect of the cocktail hour themselves, but her suggestion is that they purchase pre-made gourmet platters from a grocery store called Whole Foods. Now, I'm on the West Coast. Whole Foods is big out here. I don't know if they're nationwide. It's essentially a very pricey gourmet grocery store. So if you look at like a bargain Costco, Sam's Club being on one end of the spectrum, on the absolute furthest other end of that spectrum is Whole Foods. So maybe you have an equivalent to Whole Foods in your area. So to answer this question, mother-in-law is advocating to purchase trays from Whole Foods. I went on and I priced out a few things on Whole Foods. And again, I'm not going to get into the weeds on numbers and price tags. We did a lot of that in Wednesday's show. But just to give you a very high level overview of what I found, the price tag for a Whole Foods spread for like a wedding reception or cocktail hour type situation, you're looking at anywhere between like $12 and $16 a person. I almost said per hour, not per hour. $12 to $16 per person. Now, that's not cheap, and it's certainly not as pricey as like hand-passed gourmet stuff that you would pay for with a caterer. However, if you're aiming to spend like $2 to $3 to $4 per person and really embrace the money saving aspects of what we talked about on Wednesday, and then your mother-in-law has kind of accelerated that price tag by like $10 to $12 per person, that's a big difference. And $12 per person times 200 wedding guests, that's a lot. So I think the two of you have a few discussions that need to be had. The first one being, is her goal to really save money, or does she have like an underlying reason why she wants to go the Whole Foods route? Is she willing to help cover the costs of going the Whole Foods route if she is really super that passionate about it, and you are super that passionate about that more $2 to $3 per person price range that we talked about? And then I think my end of the day, my closing kind of answer on this, just to tie it up with a bow, would be, if you are both trying to save money on setting up a cocktail hour spread, a charcuterie spread, I do not think buying pre-made platters from a gourmet grocery store is the answer. If you are trying to save money and you want to do it that way, look at like a Costco or a Sam's Club. And if you're wrinkling your nose and you don't want to put out a plastic tray from Costco at your wedding reception, I totally get that. You can still let them do all the chopping and all the work of prepping everything. You can take it off the tray. You can put it on a nicer platter. Nobody needs to know the way you bought it. That can be our little secret. And then you can always dress that up with some fancy mustard, some olives, some pickles, some jams, some fancier crackers. The sky is the limit. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and best of luck to you. And then from here going forward for the rest of the show, I'm going to shift gears again, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently with the rest of these listener emails. So instead of sharing a question and then answering it as we go and going back and forth, what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to share all of your listener notes first, and then I'm going to come back and tie everything together at the end. That sounds kind of weird, I know, but trust the process. I do have a plan. So here we go with the first listener email, which is about a cocktail and appetizer only reception timeline. So they write, "This is something we are definitely interested in pursuing, but I'm having a hard time envisioning what the timeline would look like. We're not really big dancers, and I can't imagine our crowd engaging in traditional wedding reception stuff for hours and hours on end, but it also makes me feel a little bit let down to imagine everyone just going home at 6 p.m. and everything being over. What are your thoughts?" Okay, so stick a bookmark there. Timeline questions if we're doing cocktails and appetizers only after a ceremony. The next listener note: Hey, Cara, just wanted to share we loved your podcast and our wedding day was amazing. We felt present the entire time. There were a couple of minor hiccups, but nothing major, and it was amazing to be in one spot with everyone we love. All that said, we were unfortunately really let down by our catering, which came along with a $145 per person charge. If we had to do it over again, I would have spent more time looking into creative options other than a traditional venue and catering package. Okay, very interesting. And now we're going to move on to the final listener note on this topic. Hi, Cara. Thank you so much for your podcast episodes. We listened to every single one for the past 15 months of our engagement, and we finally did it. Our wedding was 2 weekends ago, and we did things a bit differently, which definitely raised some eyebrows among our families. We decided to keep it really small, did the ceremony and meal at a really nice local restaurant. The food and service was amazing, and the best part was that it was basically all-inclusive. No rental items, no staff to hire, no catering to hire. The restaurant has all of this built in. It was so easy. We enjoyed our morning getting ready. We showed up to the restaurant, enjoyed a beautiful ceremony, a beautiful meal, and that was it. Afterwards, we took a couple of hours off to do, quote, wedding day things, end quote, LOL. And it says LOL in the note. Everyone changed into party clothes, and for anyone who wanted to join, we had an after party at our favorite bar where we rented out the space, had a set tab, no agenda whatsoever, and just relaxed and had fun together. We opened up the after party to all of our friends, which I know some may see as tacky, but whatever. We had the time of our lives until 2 a.m. when they closed. It was easy, it was cheap, and now in hindsight, I'm honestly surprised that more couples don't do this. Okay, wow. So many good points in these 3 very similar emails. And you probably noticed a theme here. The first theme that I want to touch on is going outside the box and just completely thinking outside the lines and knowing that you don't have to follow a traditional wedding reception flow. And if you are wanting to kind of do things a little bit differently, you are definitely not alone. So I chose these 3 to share today because they all tie into our theme for the week, which is, looking outside the box for ways to increase quality and value of your wedding day food. And food is just such an important discussion point because it is really expensive. It's one of the biggest investments you're going to make throughout this whole process. And if you are paying for amazing high quality food and that's a priority to you, that's obviously the goal. That's what I want for everyone. But if food is not incredibly important to you and you're still going to end up paying thousands upon thousands of dollars for it, but it turns out to be mediocre at best, then that's a problem. And I'm sharing all of these different scenarios and questions so that you can start to think outside the box and start to do some creative problem solving and advance proactive thinking about how you can seek out the highest quality and value, not only of your cocktail hour spread, but of your wedding day meal, and even beyond that, literally to everything. I know on Wednesday we talked to death all about the price of cheese and grapes and fancy mustard and prosciutto, but the overall theme, again, that I really, really want to hammer home is just the thinking outside the lines and giving you the, not permission, that's not the right word, giving you the tools and letting you know that it's okay to think creatively and it's okay to do things a little bit differently. And it's definitely okay if you have people close to you who are side-eyeing you and thinking that you're a little bit crazy because you're even considering doing anything like this on your own. I don't think it's crazy. And I guess maybe that's the true inspiration behind Wednesday's episode. I don't think it's crazy at all to provide a really high quality end product that you have sourced and done on your own, and that turns out to be better than if you had paid 8 times as much from a caterer. I think that's amazing. Okay. So here's the part of the Q&A show where you're scratching your head and wondering, okay, when is she actually going to answer the question? So let's circle back now that you have all three situations. I loved sharing things in this order because we opened with a listener question about a timeline, and we had another pipe in about how their catering was completely underwhelming. And then the third email really addresses the first email and kind of illustrates the answer to the first question. So, cocktail and appetizer only reception timeline. That listener closed with saying they felt a little bit bummed out to imagine doing a ceremony, cocktails and appetizers from say 4 to 6 o'clock, and then the whole day's over. And like everyone just disperses and goes home and that's it. We want a little more than that. So the third email that I read, the listener who kind of recapped how amazing their celebration turned out, and they did it completely out of the box and went to a restaurant and had an earlier meal after their ceremony, took a break for a couple hours, and then everyone came back at a different location and had a huge party. How fun is that? So my point in structuring it that way was that to answer the timeline question and your FOMO about ending early and just having it be over, you don't have to have it be over. You can do the appetizers and the cocktail reception, make it short and sweet, make that a 2-hour experience or even an hour and a half. That's completely up to you. You know your crowd, you know your friends and family best. And then after that, you can extend the celebration for anyone who wants to participate. I would imagine there will be a bunch of guests who will elect to go home and not go out and party at the bar until 2 a.m. And obviously, certainly don't even need to party until 2 a.m. If you just want to go to a nice cocktail lounge and have a few drinks and hang out for another few hours, go for it. It does not need to confine to a traditional reception timeline in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I always say your imagination is the limit. And that's why I'm having so much fun with these shows, because I can stand here and share from my perspective the way I've seen things done, the stories that I've heard from people, but it just makes it so much more rich and deep when you chime in with actually what you did and how it worked. And then I can in turn share that and we can kind of build a shared experience off of that. I think it's so powerful. Then to like touch one more time on the second listener note that I read about being underwhelmed by the catering, and they wish that it literally says, if I had to do it over again, I would have spent more time looking into creative options other than a traditional venue and catering package. So if you're in the middle of planning and you're in the middle of trying to figure out where you want to host your celebration, those are really powerful words. And I would really, really, really encourage you to take that statement to heart. Go back through the past podcast episodes. It's a theme that we talk about over and over again, looking at your priorities, making sure that you're honoring the things that are most important to you, doing things outside the box, all the things we've been talking about today. That's just a really powerful flash forward to someone who says, look, if hindsight is 2020, here's exactly what I would have done differently. And I love sharing that because now, because of their mistake, or not even mistake, because of something that didn't turn out ideally for them, you can kind of weigh that and look at it and flash forward a year from now and say, hey, if we went route A, what are we risking feeling in a year versus if we went route B, what does that look like? So to come full circle and wrap everything up, thank you so much for all of you who were in touch with your questions. I had a handful that just didn't fit into today's episode and theme. I will bookmark those and I will try to get to those in a future episode. And I'll also say, as we close out today's show, this has been kind of an experiment for the month of November, these Friday Q&A follow-up episodes. I am personally having a ton of fun recording these. I think it's really neat to take a more casual approach and like go behind the scenes a little bit and kind of explain why the episode came to be. And then, of course, I love sharing your follow-up questions and kind of clarifying on those. So I will continue to do these for as long as you are finding them helpful. And the best way to let me know that you're finding them helpful is to be in touch with your questions, your stories, your comments, your experiences. And you can do that by visiting our website, which is weddingplanningpodcast.co/contact. Thank you again for being here today. Thank you for including me in your wedding plans. It's really a huge honor. I do not take it lightly. Have a great weekend, and we will talk again next week.